Are you getting ready to service your 2025 Toyota Camry Hybrid? This isn't your average oil change. Toyota's new oil requirements and a few unique features of maintaining a hybrid make this job a little bit different from your typical gas-only car. In this video, I'm going to show you how to change the oil and filter, reset the maintenance reminder, and share some of the key differences in servicing a hybrid versus a conventional vehicle. So stick around. This is everything you need to keep your hybrid running at its best. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Autotech Garage. My name is Keith. Today I'm going to be giving you a full tutorial and demonstration on how to perform a couple of services on this 2025 Toyota Camry Hybrid electric vehicle. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to change the oil and filter. I want to demonstrate to you how to rotate the tires properly. We're going to give you all the tools you need to reset the maintenance reminder light, the service light, and the tire pressure monitoring system needs to be reset, recalibrated so it knows which location each wheel's in after you've rotated them. We'll go through all that in this video. Before we get started, I want to mention on here that Toyota is using a unique oil here for 2025 on this Camry. It's got a 0W8 weight that it calls for. Now this is about the lightest oil that we've seen so far to date. And before this, these cars were taking a 0W16 oil. Now I should mention in the owner's manual on this vehicle, it does say you can use a 0W16 in a pinch, just to change it out again at your next service and put the correct oil in. Now guys, this oil has been hard to locate, and honestly the only place I've been able to find it so far is at Walmart. So if you guys are searching around, take a peek there if you need some oil for your car. Before we get started, I always like to go through a couple of tools that we're going to be using here. I've got here my Milwaukee impact wrench with the 21mm socket on here. I've got my Makita 1/4" drive with a 10mm socket for the lower cover, flashlight, oil filter pliers. Got here my tire inflator, 14mm wrench and sockets. We need the key for the wheel locks. This is my trusty Lyle funnel. We've got the OE oil filter, and then we'll need 4.5 quarts of oil for this car, possibly a little more. So I've got a 5-quart Mobil 1 jug, and this is 0W8 oil, and a couple of torque wrenches here, 1/2 inch and 3/8 drive. A little bit of brake cleaner to clean up some oil mess and some rags, and of course our gloves. So guys, one important safety consideration when you're working on a hybrid is to make sure you remove the key fob from the vehicle. I always like to bring this outside of the vehicle at least 6 feet away. Make sure your hybrid system is turned to the off position. And sometimes when you're working on a hybrid, you've got the key on, the car is in the ready position, the engine doesn't run because it doesn't need to. You won't know it's running. If you try to drain the oil and the car is in the ready position, it decides for some reason it needs to start the engine and you have no oil in it, we've got a problem. Now that we've got the hood open on this car, I wanted to mention a couple of things that might differentiate this hybrid vehicle from a typical internal combustion only engine. Now of course you still got that ICE engine in here, but it's got the hybrid drive components connected to it where the transmission are. So just stay away from anything that's got a orange sheathing on it, orange wire looms, orange covers on it. All those orange colored components underneath them have the high voltage system. So the high voltage system is generally around 250 volts on these cars. You don't want to be touching any of that stuff. Completely safe for you to be in and around it. Just don't try to access any of those components. Another unique feature here is because it's a hybrid, it'll have 2 separate cooling systems on it. There'll be a cooling system for the internal combustion engine as well as a cooling system for the hybrid components. Separate water pumps, separate cooling system. They're completely separated from each other. So if you're out there doing cooling services on these, you want to make sure you service both systems when it's appropriate, using the proper bleed procedures and things on there. Always consult your repair manual and your owner's manual. Make sure you're doing everything correctly, using the right fluids. I want to go ahead and check the oil level on here. Just want to make sure it's full, see what the condition looks like before we get started. I like to leave that about halfway out. This reminds me that we haven't put any oil yet in this vehicle. We'll go ahead and loosen this cap up. Make sure you clean off the mating surface around the O-ring here and the mating surface on the top of the valve cover where that sits. And then we're ready to go ahead and put this up in the air and then drain the oil. All right, now that we're underneath the vehicle, there is a lower cover on here covering the access to the oil drain plug and the oil filter. It has 4 10mm screws on here that we'll need to take out. So we have this little electric tool for. We can go ahead and pop these out. Set that aside. Underneath here we've got our drain plug. and our oil filter over here. Let's go ahead and pop those both off. I wanted to mention this car is a hybrid. That doesn't mean it's any different from the internal combustion engine that you might find on a conventional car that's not a hybrid. So just follow the same procedures that you normally would. This looks identical to the standard internal combustion engine that you'd see on the older style Camrys. And I know I've done a video on these. If you want to watch a little more in depth, you might want to watch my earlier Toyota Camry video. Just wanted to kind of go over some of the subtleties, the differences between the hybrid and the internal combustion engine only. And really from an oil change standpoint, there's not a whole lot different going on under here. If you guys notice, I've been using these oil filter pliers here. They are adjustable for larger oil filters, and they work just fine on these really tiny Toyota filters as well with limited access. They'll squeeze right in there and get that filter off for you. If your drain plug gasket is stuck to the pan like this one, just make sure you pop it off with a little screwdriver. You're going to replace it anyway with your new drain plug gasket. Don't put two of them on there. And then when you get to your oil filter housing here, you want to go ahead and make sure there's no O-ring on there. There shouldn't be with the Toyota filter on there. They're kind of captured on the filter. But make sure you clean this flange off good. That'll be the mating surface between the oil filter and the housing there. We don't want any dirt or debris on there. We can go ahead and grab our new oil filter out of the box. It should come with a plastic cover on it. The Toyota OE filter does. Pop that off. And then underneath there, I'll show you up close here. Underneath there, you'll see it has some grease already, some film on it. That's going to be fine. You don't need to add anything extra to that. As long as it's got a little lubricant on there, we can go ahead and install that. Now you want to tighten this by hand. I think the spec is about 13.5 foot-pounds. If you have a cap that can fit on the end of the oil filter wrench, you might be able to get a torque wrench in there. Just use a little common sense when tightening that. Get it up there snug, make sure it's not loose at all. And of course, you don't need to go super tight on there. Don't go crazy on it. We're not going to try to destroy this filter putting it on. Make sure your drain plug is clean. Wipe the threads off. You don't want any dirt or debris on there either. Install your new gasket. And then wipe the bottom of your pan here after you're down to a slow drip. And you can install your oil pan drain plug back in. We'll take our trusty torque wrench here and tighten this drain plug up to 30 foot-pounds. Give it another wipe, and we'll install the lower cover. This cover has a little lip here that has to go underneath the other cover before you put it up, so make sure you get that caught in there. And then you can install the rest of your hardware. I like to put these screws in hand tight. They only thread into a plastic clip, so we don't want to over tighten them. If you'll be using one of these tools, make sure you don't go too tight with it. Just until they're seated. With the cover all tightened up, we're ready to lower this car down and put some oil in it. Let's go ahead and add some oil to this. This car calls for 4.5 quarts or so. We'll put 4.5 in with the new filter. We'll run it, let it sit and check it again. I am using my Lyle funnel here. I really like this tool. I'm sure if you watch my other videos, you've seen me use it. Check out one of those. I'll explain exactly why I like it in there. I don't want to bore you with it again in here. And then we're going to add this 0W8 Mobil 1 synthetic oil. This is a 5-quart jug. It's not a gallon. It's got an extra quart in it. So we want to make sure that we'll put 4.5 in there. We'll leave a half quart left in this jug in case we need to top it up afterwards. That looks about right there. Make sure you wipe off these sealing surfaces. There is an O-ring inside the cap here. You want to make sure that's clean, free of debris, and the same with the valve cover mating surface here. We'll check the oil one more time here before we start it. Looks good. Let's start it up. We'll go ahead and let this run here for a few seconds. Like to let it run about 30 seconds or so. Let the oil circulate. Then we can turn it off. Let the oil drain back down into the pan for a minute or so before we double check the level one last time. Looks like this car could use a splash more oil. We'll top it up. Looks like our vehicle here took a little more than 4.5 quarts, maybe 4.75 quarts, somewhere in that range to get you right to the top of the full range. Of course, when you're doing an oil change, it's a good idea to check all your fluids, top up your washer fluid, anything else that might need to be added to. The washer fluid on this vehicle here is on the passenger side. There's not an easy way to check the level on these, but you can usually listen to the sound. If you can't, you'll see it'll just start to back up in the filler neck. Don't overfill it. You don't want it spilling all over the place and making you think you have a leak somewhere. We'll check the air filter now. It's located underneath this box here. There's 2 clips on the top. There's a couple of tabs on the bottom. Just make sure when we take this filter out, we don't want to pull this too hard and destroy the bellows on here. We can take the air filter out. You want to check it. Make sure there's not a lot of dirt in the pleats here and things. If it looks good, you can tap it out and put it back in. You want to install those 2 tabs first over here at the bottom. Push it down flat and then snap your clips in place. Now that we've completed the oil change service on here, double checked our fluid level, we're going to get into rotating these tires. A couple things we need to do. When this vehicle came in, it had wheel key and wheel locking nuts on it. When I have these, it's best to break these loose with a wrench, not to use an impact tool. It's possible, if you're not careful with this, that you could strip the pattern, the star pattern that's inside the key here, break it right off the key and possibly damage the locking nuts as well. If you break these loose by hand first, it's usually a little bit safer. I'm going to go ahead and pop all 4 of these loose and put up in the air and take the wheels off. I also wanted to mention that we're going to be rotating the tires, and we want to check the tire pressure now as well before we take the wheels off. You can do it at any point, but it should be done during your oil change service too. We're just doing a combination here on, so we're getting to the tire pressures a little bit later than I normally would. When you're adjusting your tire pressures, the manufacturer will give you their recommended tire pressure settings in the driver's door decal. So open that driver's door up and look inside the B-pillar there. You'll probably see a decal and it should show you exactly what they're recommending. You can deviate, up or down a few pounds if you want. I like to go a pound or 2 higher, maybe 36 pounds or 37 pounds on these cars. The manufacturer for this particular model is calling for 35 PSI. If you guys are doing a tire rotation at home, it may not be very easy for you. You're gonna need to put the car up on 4 jack stands. You don't want to get the vehicle all the way up in the air, or maybe do one side at a time, the left side and the right side. This particular vehicle, the owner's manual is calling for a rotation straight from front to back only, no crossing of the tires. So it's easy to jack up one side of the car. Make sure you're using jack stands to support it after you jack it up. You can do 2 wheels at a time and then move to the other side. If you need to get all 4 up and you need to cross the tires over, it might be easier just to take the vehicle to a tire shop or to your local technician, whatever your service provider is, and let them do the rotation for you. It's a whole heck of a lot easier up on the lift. While you've got the tires off, this is a great opportunity for you to check your tread, You want to check the depth on it, check the condition, the tread wear pattern on there, and just make sure everything is wearing properly, looks normal. If you haven't seen my video, I've got a full description of what tire information on the side of the tire, what it all means, and it's just certainly a good one for you to watch. I do explain tread depth on there, the measurements and those types of things. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and check that video out. I'm going to go ahead and rotate these tires front to back and put the lug nuts back on, and we'll be on our way here. All right, I wanted to mention on here, while you're rotating the tires, this is obviously a good opportunity to inspect your brakes as well. Anytime we've got the wheels off, we're taking a peek at the brake pads. It's a good time to access that little hole in the middle of the caliper there, where you can get a good look at the inboard pad as well as the outboard pad. Another thing I like to do, if you guys especially live in a climate where there's a lot of rust, I always keep a little bottle of this engine oil here. I like to lubricate the threads on the studs. Just helps them go on and off a little bit nicer, keeps them from rusting too easily. Just a drop will do you on each of the threads. And then we can put that wheel back up. When you're installing the wheels, it's important that you make sure this hub and flange are mated together flat. You don't want it to be crooked, especially if you're using some sort of an impact tool to tighten the wheels up. You always want to make sure this is pressed flat against the hub. This way you don't try to put the wheel on while it's cockeyed and then you're pulling one side in and kind of stretching it across the hub. It's never good for the studs, the wheel, or the hub. Make sure you're putting all your lug nuts on a couple of turns by hand. You should be able to get them on with your fingers. You don't want to cross thread anything if you're going to be using an impact tool. I like to wiggle the wheel while I'm pulling this in nice and gentle, especially that first one. Make sure it's sitting flat. We're going to let this car down, and we're going to torque all these lug nuts to 76 foot-pounds. It's always good to know the torque specifications for your vehicle. Like I said, this is 76 foot-pounds, which is very light for a wheel lug nut. Some cars are well over 100, and these impact wrenches that you use, electric, air, doesn't matter, they're going to go well over 100, so you need to be really careful. I just like to snug them up while the car is in the air so the wheel sits flat on the hub, and then bring it down and definitely use your torque wrench, get them all torqued properly. You be extra careful on your wheel lock here. Make sure you're pushing it in, it's seated properly so you don't strip it.
All right, guys, well, we're here inside the vehicle, and I want to teach you how to reset a few of the maintenance lights. Now, these newer cars, they have a couple of options. There's an oil service reminder, and there's also an service reminder. So there's a couple of different ones in there. I think how you use the service reminder is pretty much up to you. You may want to just reset them both. I've noticed in some of these cars that you reset one and the oil is still showing that it's due for an oil change. So I find it's just easier, especially for my clients, if they're not using the other service reminder, to reset them both at the same time. This way there's no confusion on that. And the settings are right next to each other. I'll show you that as we go through it. In addition to resetting your service and oil lights, you're going to want to put this vehicle into the wheel position registration mode. Now, this mode is going to require you to first activate it. After you've activated the mode, then you're going to need to drive this vehicle for a bit. So you're probably going to want to get on the road right after you do this, and then drive it for at least 10 to 30 minutes. And then this vehicle will eventually register the new wheel positions in the correct locations. There are some instructions in there. For some reason you can't get this thing to reset itself within 30 minutes of driving. They want you to take it home and basically leave the ignition on. All that information is in the service manual, but I haven't seen any of these that don't reset fairly quickly. Usually about 10-15 minutes driving maximum, you should start to see the information displaying on your instrument panel. The first thing we're going to do once you're ready to reset these lights, you're going to press the start stop button a couple of times until you get your instrument panel to light up. Once you're lit up, you can press your back arrow. Whatever screen you're on, you want to get to this one. So by using this up and down cursors on the left side of the steering wheel, it allows you to scroll through all your options. Just go ahead and select the gear. Once you're on the gear, you can go right and left either direction to get you over to the car with the gear on it. And then you want to hold the OK button. That's going to get you into these reset features. So we've got some options in here. You can do your scheduled maintenance from here. If you want to reset that, just go to yes and press OK. If you want to reset your oil maintenance light, you can select that, go up to yes, and select OK. And then there's another third option in here for your tire pressure wheel sensors. And it says TPWS setting. You want to press that. And then on here, if you've rotated your tires, you'll go to tire rotation. And then you want to select yes. So in here it says it's setting the tire position. So this is starting to change the location of your wheels now. It's going to adapt to wherever you've put them. It takes about anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes for this registration process to be complete. So you want to make sure the vehicle is running before you enter this mode. And then once you've got it set up there for wheel position registration, then you want to just continue to drive the vehicle. In the owner's manual, it does state you want to turn the left turns and right turns occasionally, but either way, just a normal amount of driving, 10 or 15 minutes is usually enough to get these to reset. You'll see that it'll say that the reset has been complete, or at least start to display the tire information for you, tire pressures and things. So just a normal amount of driving should get you covered and get these wheel positions registered in the correct locations.
All right, guys, there's a couple things that you need to know about a hybrid. One is there is a hybrid battery, a high voltage battery, underneath the back seat of this Camry. All hybrids have a high voltage disconnect, a service plug. In this particular vehicle, underneath this side, on the passenger side, there's a cover here. And underneath this cover is where the service plug is to disconnect the high voltage battery from the rest of the car. Anytime we're doing work on a high voltage system, replacing an inverter or any of those components, we'll remove the service plug so we don't have to worry about the high voltage system so much. This battery is air cooled, and it also has an air filter that needs to be serviced from time to time. Underneath the driver's side, there is a cover here. This cover houses the air filter for the high voltage battery. All you have to do is pop it off and access it. And there's your air filter. Depending on how dirty your interior is, if you leave your windows open and it's super dusty where you're driving, I would recommend checking this every 15,000 miles or so. You may not replace it for at least 30. Just get a good look at it every once in a while when you're servicing your vehicle.
All right, my friends, I appreciate you following along in this tutorial. I hope you've learned a little bit about servicing a hybrid. Nothing you need to be scared about in there. Stay away from the big fat orange wires and keep your hands off the high voltage battery in the back of the car, and you should be in good shape. Make sure you're checking both coolants on the cooling system, and you're good to go. Just keep good care of your Toyota. It's going to take good care of you. Appreciate you watching our content. Thanks for following along with us. We've got another video coming up for you right over here, and we'll see you in the next one.